If you live in the USA like me, walked out your door, and just decided to walk up, what would eventually happen? Well, you'd eventually get arrested by the Monty police force for illegally entering Canada. That's bad, so maybe get a passport and do it the normal way. But let's just pretend for a second that that wouldn't happen. What's out there? How far could you go? What happens to the Earth? Who lives out there? Canada could be considered normal. As soon as you cross the border, it looks just like Washington, Idaho, and Montana, the states below it. But this thing stretches to the Arctic Circle and beyond, almost all the way to the North Pole. Its northernmost province, Nunavut, has a chain of islands that are practically Eskimo-kissing Greenland. If you kept walking north, eventually, tree.png would stop working. What I'm saying is the trees would no longer be there, but the incredible mountains and hills remain as you continue to walk and find yourself in this strange, barren combination of Canadian wilderness and Arctic shape. Vast stretches and stretches of it. To give you an idea, the province of Nunavut is the size of Western Europe, despite less than 50,000 people living there. I don't know if anyone living in Nunavut has ever built with us in Minecraft, but fresh-faced Canadian Minecraft enthusiasts have been ambitiously attempting to capture the wonder, the beauty, the Christmas miracle that is all of Canada, one of the largest countries in the world. They've built Nunavut's capital and more. So sit back and relax. Maybe drink some maple syrup until your blood toxification levels go critical and you suffer cardiac arrest. And take a trip with me into the mysterious land of moose. Here's everything Canada has ever done. First up, we have Montreal, Canada, the second largest city in the country and a center of rich culture and interesting communities. Montreal is, strangely enough, an island not exactly surrounded by water, but really surrounded by land. The settlement in its earliest stages during the 1600s, called Ville Marie at the time, was almost completely abandoned due to local raids, reducing the population to almost non-existent levels. They communicated with France in an attempt to bolster the population to save it, and if this effort failed, the survivors of Montreal would be relocated downriver to Quebec City. Fortunately, 100 new settlers arrived, prior to which the settlement's population was down to less than 50 souls. But it's not a happy ending. Montreal fell 100 years later in 1760 to a British offensive during the 7 Years' War. Then the Americans would take it. All of this happening around 1776, coinciding with the American Revolutionary War. American negotiators, including Benjamin Franklin, unsuccessfully attempted to argue to obtain Montreal and Quebec, the territory, as part of the war spoils. That would have been a really interesting turn of events, significant portions of Canada being annexed to the United States. But you know what they say. Never say never. These days, Montreal is North America's #1 host for international events, including the Summer Olympics of 1976 and the Expo 67, the latter being considered the most successful world fair of the 20th century, and hosts the world touring Cirque du Soleil, the most insanely acrobatic and trippy circus show in the world. Montreal is known as a city of sin historically for having unparalleled nightlife. And as long as we're talking about Montreal, we can show what Team Canada has also created in the neighboring suburb Boisbriand, a place with a rather intense collision of 3 major highways. The area has a significant Hasidic community, making an entire 11% of the population. They have a crime rate that's 24% lower than the average, a cost of living 8% less than the average, and the majority of the area predominantly speaks French. In terms of what they've created in Minecraft, we can see a focus on what appears to be an outlet mall and a focus on some of these rather intense highway intersections. Now we're looking at Toronto, the most populous city in all of Canada. Like Montreal, Toronto was in the hands of the Americans during the events related to the 7 Years' War, and in 1813 during the Battle of York, where Americans eventually took control of Toronto and plundered it. While Canada and America fighting sounds like a joke, it was the reality historically. Will history repeat itself? All I can say is, never say never. But in 2003, Toronto hosted the epic SARS outbreak. But like you thought I was gonna say like a convention or something? No, a respiratory illness. And so they locked things down, which hurt the economy. That sounds familiar. This may or may not have been related to the city's epic blackout in the same year, with millions of people in Toronto out of power, lasting 3 days, trapping people in skyscrapers. It was anarchy. And in situations like this, United States governments would solve a lot of these issues. And here it is. The fake the CN Tower. Some of you might say that's rude, but come on. Come on. We built the Space Needle, and then they built this thing 10 years later. But it's okay, we got that joke out of the way. It needed to be addressed. This thing was the world's tallest standing structure for 32 freaking years, only to be surpassed by Wiz Khalifa. Interestingly enough, the CN Tower has a basement level, which I assume is underground, host to many different rides and attractions since the 90s. This is both really random and interesting, but I also think it's kind of a missed opportunity. Imagine roller coasters on the top level of the tower, going in and out of the structure, flying and snaking around it. It would be terrifying. Sign me up. Team Canada have completed a significant portion of Canada's Wonderland. I know the name, it sounds like this is maybe the North Pole that Will Ferrell's Elf may have came from, but it's actually a roller coaster theme park, opened in 1981. This thing has been growing ever since and now is host to 17 different roller coasters, 60 thrill rides, and over 200 attractions in the totality of the park. Now, the chances of injuring yourself on a roller coaster is supposedly 1 in 15.5 million rides, but some say that Wonderland's older coasters are a little rickety and you can expect to get bumped and bruised on the rides. Others say that wooden roller coasters and some others, including the Bat and the Dragon Fire, can cause neck and head pain. In fact, just a few months ago, 2 riders were stuck on the Lumberjack ride upside down for 30 minutes. I had an experience when I was a kid of getting stuck on one of those Ring of Fire rides where it was stuck upside down for 4 or 5 minutes. But this is something else. They reported losing feeling in their feet and were evacuated for chest pain before leaving the park. We cannot guarantee safety when visiting these attractions in Minecraft. Team Canada have also been working on Halifax, one of the community's more passionate grounds for building. The progress is spotty, but immense. And as far as Canada goes, the closest thing to what could be called a war for building grounds took place here. A well-known member of Build the Earth and known personality on this channel, Parzival, fought for the rights to build the Citadel Fort located in the center, between him and someone else who will not be named. That someone else eventually got banned, but not before Parzival asked me to start building this area for him. So I did. In a few days, I had managed to build most of the interior of the fort, with assurances from Parzival that he would take it from there and complete the rest. Parzival never did, but upon logging in to check out Halifax for the purposes of this video, I noticed something. This is not my version of the Citadel Fort. They must have erased it. Furthermore, their recreation of the fort's progress since this happened a few years ago is nowhere close to what I managed to do in 2 or 3 days. And then instead of rebuilding to my point of progress, it's just languished in an incomplete state on the server for years. Anyways, St. John is a seaport city located on the Bay of Fundy, beautifully overlooking the water, and is Canada's oldest incorporated city. The city has very interesting architectural niches, which is why I think the team has put progress here. 19th and 20th century styles are paramount, some of which also feature stone carvings and sculptures. Being so open to the Atlantic Ocean and so close to the eastern Canadian border, it would be a vulnerable defensive position for an eventual war with their southern neighbor, the United States. Though historically, the city's port is of global stature. To give you an idea of its stature, they've also built the adjacent St. John Port Battery, a now residential area which historically hosted many fixed gun positions poised to fire on invading fleets. This clearly has been gorgeously textured and completed in Minecraft and is amongst my Canadian favorites. But as beautiful as this area is, both in Minecraft and in real life, it's actually somewhat unfeasible in its current state. It's dangerous. The Canadian government has repeatedly investing in protecting its citizens that live there from the geological instability, but the area is historically home to many mudslides and snow avalanches depending on what season you're in. This is the West Edmonton Mall, a gigalith mall that was the largest indoor structure in the world until 2004 and home to 9 indoor attractions including roller coasters, and has 32 million visitors a year and 24,000 employees on average at a time. A year after its premier roller coasters debuted in 1985, one of the cars detached from the railing, throwing 4 people from the car to the concrete below, 3 of which died, 1 surviving with critical injuries. Amazingly enough, they didn't decommission it, but upgraded the car design and reopened 6 months later. Welcome to the 80s, I guess. The coaster wasn't decommissioned until January of 2023 after 37 years of service. Furthermore, in December of 2000, a man drowned in one of the mall's recreational lagoons. He apparently was seen swimming in it at 2:30 a.m. after a nearby drinking establishment had closed, though a second security check did not reveal him to be there later, though his body was found the next morning. Currently still held world records for the mall include world's largest indoor lake, world's largest indoor wave pool, world's tallest indoor permanent bungee tower, and world's largest parking lot with more than 30,000 spaces. Team Canada have begun work on the surrounding parking lot, as well as a little bit of progress on the interior, which would be a fantastic sight once completed. While this mall is popular, the next location experiences significantly less visitors. In fact, there are no permanent residents of any kind in Alert, the northernmost permanent establishment in the world, being just 500 miles away from the North Pole. Since being established and built in 1950, several planes have crashed in an attempt to reach it, causing various deaths. Canadian service members typically live at the facility for 6 months before returning to the mainland. In the 1990s, the original buildings for the station, built in the 50s, were in such a state of disrepair that they burned most of them in the summer of 1996 before building entirely new ones. The station's transient population of military and research workers peaked in the 70s at around 250, while today only around 60 people man the station in the winter, with a maximum of around 110 in the summer. And up next is Niagara Falls, completed by a collaboration between several North American teams very early on in the project, I believe dating to 2020. Niagara Falls itself was created 10,000 years ago when a glacier over Wisconsin retreated to the north, leaving a huge amount of meltwater in the Great Lakes, pouring over this area and rearranging the geological topography. In terms of how it's represented in Minecraft, the choice for representing foam and such is very interesting, and still holds up as a unique solution for detailing waterfalls to this day. There's some surrounding completed terrain in terms of roads and buildings, as well as the nearby bridge. Team Canada has also begun progress on the downtown sector of Calgary. First thing you need to know about this place is that it is rich, having the largest number of millionaires per capita of any major Canadian city. The natives referred to this area as Elbow, and I guess that's why they named it the Elbow River, for its sudden bend in shape. An oil field in Calgary was discovered in 1914, the largest in the British Empire at over 19 million cubic meters, and over 500 oil companies sprang up overnight. This became the linchpin of Calgary's economic success, tying into the modern millionaire statistic, and have allowed them to invest in manufacturing and technology to a high degree with all of the capital generated. And progress has begun in small parts of Quebec City, the oldest significant establishment in modern Canada, being founded in 1608. The Americans' invasion of Canada and Quebec failed in 1775 when attempting to take the city. But next time we will not be so easily denied, as it's vulnerable to stealth companies of militia rowing upstream into the heart of the civilizational center. And here is one of the largest areas of completed progress: Ottawa, Canada, the capital city. Originally inhabited by the Algonquin Anishinaabe, Ottawa was founded in 1826 as Bytown. Now I know you're asking, what was Bytown's original primary economic driver? Timber, bitch. The history of Bytown is crazy. French Canadians had completely cornered the timber industry, so the disenfranchised Irish immigrants formed a gang called the Shiners, who started terrorizing the townsfolk in any way they could think of. They mangled horses, attacked pregnant women, polluted wells, broke windows. On one instance, they even broke apart a funeral procession, taking the coffin and throwing it out on the street. Eventually, the French Canadians formed their own organization and brawled with the Shiners in the streets until the leaders of the Shiners were arrested, some being relocated. Without leadership, groups claiming to be the Shiners would occasionally engage in acts of violence, but the frequency faded, and it became history. It sounds to me like the Canadian version of Gangs of New York, and it doesn't stop there. The Stony Monday riot also took place in 1849. Major rebellions had upturned Canadian culture the decade before, and so they were passing the Rebellion Losses Bill. But this bill would end up compensating members of the rebellion who participated in the destruction and violence, but were never actually charged. Thus, the townsfolk were up in a rioting frenzy about it. This was so bad in Montreal that they assaulted Lord Elgin and burned burned the Parliament buildings down. Lord Elgin then decided to relocate the capital to Bytown, which then was incorporated as the city of Ottawa. Today, during part of the winter season, the Ottawa section of the canal forms the world's largest skating rink, and it's also used as a 5-mile transportation path to downtown for ice skaters. That sounds awesome! I want to try it! It would be a useful canal for the ice skating division of the US military. Ottawa is home to a giant Cold War bunker as well, and its Parliament buildings almost perished in a fire, ironically, as opposed to its bloody and raucous founding. Today, it's clean and green. And in the neighborhood near Ottawa named Glebe, Team Canada has been slowly filling out the house plots for new builders to polish up their skills. Glebe is a very old neighborhood, also dating back to the 1800s, complete with their own newspaper being published for 50 years. Most Glebe houses were built prior to 1914, which is apparent in their charming architectural design, and the neighborhood itself has a very religious history and communal population. Here's the beginning progress on Regina, a town smack dab in the middle of Canada. Being smack dab in the middle of Canada puts it directly north of the Tornado Alley of the United States, so it's no surprise to learn that Canada's deadliest tornado in 1914 struck right there, gutting a line through the town and killing 28 people. Many of its most beautiful and significant buildings were lost post-World War II due to being demolished. Regina has one of the highest crime rates in the country. Historically, this tracks, as it was heavily involved in rebellions in the 1800s. The natives would hunt roaming bison in this area long before any of it was settled. Team Canada has also begun significant progress in the downtown sector of Vancouver, BC, the prominent West Coast city in Canada. Vancouver is much like its own unique civilization, being an interesting blend of Canadian culture, West Coast American culture, and prior to settlement, significant native civilization and transience dating back as far as before 10,000 years ago and beyond. Since this would have been one of the first areas humans would have traveled through 60,000 years ago, when the land bridge between Alaska and Russia still existed. Vancouver is one of the largest film destinations after Los Angeles in North America. All of Battlestar Galactica was filmed here, one of my favorite shows. Funnily enough, at one point in the show, they find a planet that's habitable for them to live on, but just barely, as it's cold, rainy, and miserable. So being in Vancouver, they were just able to film all of that outside. Perfect. The provincial government of Vancouver instituted prohibition in the 1920s, much like the States, and opium had to be specifically banned as well when it was discovered that these huge riots in the town stemmed from the participation in opium dens within the city. Today, we don't have an opium problem. Yet. Now we're gonna answer the question I posed at the beginning of this video. Where would you end up if you just kept walking north? Well, in this case, we're lucky. There is one highway that reaches this place, a place called Yellowknife, the largest city, the only city in an entire province called the Northern Territories. This is a beautifully done radius of completed progress by Team Canada, and a testament to the frigid beauty and ambitious humanity on the brink of the extreme, and it really shows. Yellowknife was settled pretty recently in the 1930s, and quickly expanded when gold, silver, and other minerals were located in many areas surrounding the settlement. In 1978, a nuclear-powered Soviet satellite crashed near the town, and the radioactive matter brought an environmental alarm to the town. Diamonds were found north of Yellowknife in the 90s, bringing on the fourth and final mining boom, closing the remains of the gold mines in 2004 and retaining a diamond mining economy to the present day. This place has temperatures relative but probably even colder on average than Iceland, averaging -14 Fahrenheit in the coldest winter months and growing to a comfortable 60 degrees Fahrenheit in the hottest summer months. Nunavut was originally part of the Northern Territories until they officially split in the 90s, creating a fine division between Canada's last usable tract of northern land and what goes even further, to the point where you can't even build roads. We spoke before about how this area gets so cold and frozen that not even trees occupy the vast, endless stretches of land. What we haven't talked about is that when humans first crossed over into North America 60,000 years ago to populate the continents, some of them actually ventured here and lived out a sustenance. Aside from igloos, they made homes out of animal skins, using bones for supports since there was no wood to speak of. Their diet consisted entirely of seafood, primarily whale and seal, and they lived this way for thousands and thousands of years. This is Nunavut, and the people who live there. Team Canada has been working on the region's capital and only city, Iqaluit, the largest Inuit community situated off the coast of the mainland and near the water on the Cascading Islands on the way to Greenland. Iqaluit was comprised of purely the Inuit until World War II, when the United States built the Frobisher Bay Air Base. This would eventually become the Iqaluit Airport. Iqaluit is only accessible by boat for part of the year, and no roads reach the entire province, let alone this capital. So almost everything that they have in the city comes in on those airplanes. In these decades following the war, the population almost exploded equally from non-Inuit and local Inuit in the area, taking advantage of the opportunities there. A full-time doctor, a school, and social services manifested, and the Inuit population grew even more rapidly in response. This place is cold, averaging -15 Fahrenheit or around that for most of the winter months, but it doesn't hold a candle to Russia's Yakuts, mostly due to the marine currents stabilizing possible extremes. And that's it. Here at the top of the world lay one of Canada's province's capitals in the most extreme regions of the world in total isolation, and we've started building it. Reminds me a lot of our adventures building in Antarctica. It's sort of a northern McMurdo station, but without penguins. And that is everything that Canada has ever done. To many people, Canada may have seemed a very mysterious place. Like Russia, it has so much unused land in its northern stretches that it just seems so mysterious. That's because it is. It's a very uninhabitable area with nothing and no one. Strange and empty. Beautiful and fascinating. But hopefully we're just a little bit more knowledgeable and understanding of these areas from watching these videos, which is good because when the United States invades and conquers these lands, assimilating it into our culture will involve plowing roads, placing McDonald's and Walmarts, and making this awesome. When America finally absorbs its winter hat like a geological crown, it will be the dawn of a new era. And next up will be the annexation of the world into freedom.
Oh god, every time. This always happens. Okay, let's see here. Charge. Oh.
Listen!
You think this is the last of me? Well, I'll be back on account of my free health cash.